Welcome to episode 12 of Disruption and Kindness. I'm Travis, and I'm sitting here with my partner, Caleb.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about brands, businesses, and how they impact culture. What's up, man?
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm busy. And my brain is like calculating through everything that's happened this past week and kind of the clip that Monsoon is running at right now.
Right.
And yeah, busy.
It's a lot.
It's happy. It's a satisfying feeling. I would rather have so much going on than be sitting around like twiddling my thumbs waiting for something to happen or take place.
Oh, it's the best problem imaginable, but it's always a difficult. It's like this chicken or the egg situation. It's like we're getting so many projects where we need more employees, but we need more projects to hire said employees. So there's this transitional moment of discomfort where, you're just hoping you can get everything done with the team you've got for a little while.
Right. I think there's probably like a scientific element to like figuring out when, like an exact formula of when you hire somebody. But almost every single business owner that I've talked to about, chicken or the egg, like you're saying, which do you wait for more work and then hire employees and hope that their expertise can handle the workload that's coming in? Or do you preempt and hire employees and take that risk that you have more work coming in and you're just going to foretell it and have trained employees that are ready to hit the ground running when things accelerate? It's just it's an interesting predicament to be in. And it's always fun to know when to pull the trigger. So.
I think it's also been interesting just kind of with I wouldn't say that our business has a lot of seasonality. Like I know a lot of companies, like their peak times are in the summertime and they die off in the winter. For us, and at least with our agency, our clients just kind of quit talking to us around November because the holidays kick in.
Thanksgiving happens and then they're gone.
Right. They just take off. And then around mid-January, early February, all of a sudden they're like, oh wait, we gotta get back to work. It's a new year.
I have a business.
Yeah. I have stuff to do, and then everyone needs all their stuff done ASAP, all at one time.
Sure.
And so it's ramped up a lot for us just because of the time of year it is. But this is also the beginning of a new season for Disruption and Kindness.
Yep.
And I know we were talking about this a little bit off camera, but I think the biggest challenge for this show, and I think this could be really valuable for anyone that's wanting to start a podcast. The number of people that tag me in posts that are related to does anyone have a podcast? Does anyone know how to start a podcast? Does anyone know anything about equipment? People tag me all the time in this stuff. So I think there's a lot of interest in starting these things and building content out.
Sure.
Is kind of knowing what pitfalls there are. And I think for us, the biggest pitfall has been actually planning and prioritizing the show while it's in this infancy stage and while we're still figuring out the formatting and everything.
Yeah, it's important, right? Getting content out is important, but also creating a content library. And for us, our podcast, we're really wanting it to feel current. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, technically we could sit down, slam out 5 episodes just in a single day, day and a half and have content to release and make it more sustainable that way. But I think that you lose, especially season 1, we were focusing on current news, current events, current articles,
probably how
brands
much.
And companies, probably too much. And it was just difficult to do that in the midst of work would happen, projects would happen, potential client emergency, and this podcast would get pushed to the next week. Someone would get sick, it'd get pushed. And figuring out those lulls to create consistent content, I think is really important.
Absolutely. One of the big changes to our format, for those that haven't maybe watched the first episode of this new season, is we're starting to implement guests into the show. And that's been a really fun thing to kind of bring in and to learn and all that. I think it's really helped on the planning side too, just because we have such a diversity of friends and colleagues in our network, and the planning gets simplified, but the content couldn't be more diverse.
Sure.
And so we're really excited. So our guest today is Jonathan Wynne. Jonathan is the executive director of TOVA Coffeehouse. TOVA is a nonprofit coffee shop that stewards its platform and resources to break cycles of poverty in the Lubbock community. What's up, John?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good, man.
Honored to be here. Thank you.
Of course. So when we say that you're breaking cycles of poverty with a coffee shop, what does that even mean?
Oh, that's an excellent question. As a nonprofit organization, but also as a business, right? We steward, kind of like Travis just said in the intro, we use our business as a platform for other local nonprofit organizations here in the local community those local nonprofits are obviously doing great work in our community, and there's a lot of nonprofits, specifically here in Lubbock, Texas, that are doing all sorts of great things. You have organizations like United Way and Salvation Army, and those are great things, nationally based, but those aren't typically going to be the partners that we're choosing. We're typically looking for more locally based nonprofits that might need a little bit more of an edge and help, both financially and with their platform, to really help people in the community, one, know that they exist, know what they're doing, know the experts in whatever they're working in, and really trying to get people to see how they can participate by not just donating their money, but their time also.
Gotcha. So you're helping these nonprofits financially, but also from like an optics standpoint as well, and helping them get exposure with your customer base.
Absolutely, yeah. So again, when we're talking about platforms, we're really talking about sharing our media platforms. So we have things like Facebook and Instagram where people can follow us, and I believe at this point we're nearing the 4,000 mark on both of those, if not over by now, and that's just something that keeps growing. I can't tell you why from a marketing perspective. Maybe you guys know why, but people follow coffee shops, right?
Right.
And it's something that just keeps increasing and increasing, and it never really dies. And so the idea is, at least on the platform side of things, whenever we create content and share it on our social media platforms, we're doing that for free, not just as a service, but really from our nonprofit side of things that aligns with our mission and vision. We're trying to elevate the poverty conversation by making people aware of the different ways that poverty manifests itself in the community, and in what ways are these other nonprofits working to engage and eliminate the poverty conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a very fascinating discussion. I mean, you're taking a business model, a coffee shop, which, to be honest, just from a trend perspective, most coffee shops are going very upscale in their experience, and the fact that they're doing pour overs, and like long gone are the days of getting $1 cup of coffee. I mean, it's just trending. Coffee shops are trending that way. And so to take a business model like a coffee shop and actually apply it towards ridding poverty through education, through a platform, through partnering through other nonprofits, it's very fascinating. And I think that you're honestly, from a brand perspective, I think you see a lot of goodwill brought back towards TOVA from the community of people who actually connect with that vision. And I've heard, even just being up there, people that are more than happy to drive out of their way across town to come to TOVA because they know that you guys are doing something more with that money than just providing good coffee.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the Lubbock community in general, also being just kind of located in West Texas, we kind of live in a pretty friendly atmosphere, right?
Sure.
Just culturally speaking. But the Lubbock community itself has shown itself to be very supportive, especially over the last year. One, for just small businesses in general, not just TOVA, but specifically TOVA. And yeah, I think you're right, Caleb. There's an attachment that our guests come into. They love being able to know that their purchases is going to something greater than themselves, right?
Sure. So how is TOVA structured? I think that the idea of a coffee shop also being a nonprofit, it's clearly a for-profit business, but it's a nonprofit.
Correct. Yeah.
Organization. It's an interesting mesh. So how is TOVA structured?
Sure.
And then I know you're the executive director. What does that mean?
Sure. So you're right. For a lot of people who first come into contact with TOVA, they figure out that usually it works. They find out that we're a coffee shop, and then they come into the shop and they discover somewhere along the way, typically is the pattern, that we're a nonprofit organization. So like you said, clearly we're selling products like specialty coffee and pastries and those kinds of things for profit. However, we do have our legal 501c3 license filed with the IRS and all that stuff. And so we have a board of directors that actually sits above me. So I think we have a board of about 8 people right now. So I have 7 bosses, right, that I report to.
Sure.
And even as the executive director, and that's really what my position is. It is my job and responsibility to navigate the business side, the day-to-day side, to oversee all the projects, all the vision casting, all the team dynamics, conflict management, managerial training, or I should say really formation, right? Because we have a group of great managers that all do different things, but it's really my job to steward and make sure that the job that the shop, is running efficiently, smoothly, and one, just to make sure that the business is succeeding in general, and then reporting that, of course, to the board and make sure that everything that we're doing is actually accomplishing the mission and the vision that was set from the onset of TOVA's creation. So
interesting. Gotcha. So what does that relationship look like between you and your board? Is it like a monthly meeting and they cast a vision for what you want to do, or are you bringing fresh ideas to them? Like what does that happen?
Sure. So I would say, it's a interesting, I would say almost kind of fluid relationship, and it depends on the board member, right? So of course we do have monthly board meetings, and so we usually, what that ends up being is, meeting the month after, right? So let's say we go through the month of January. We'll meet in February to discuss, of course, the financial things, the P&L, those kinds of, things for the month of January, just discuss where we're at, where expenses were, why did we make this purchase, or looking at payroll, just really kind of looking at the financials, making sure we're in a good spot financially speaking. However, typically how it works is, at least with myself and at least the board president and the vice president, I have a more day-to-day, specifically with the board president, a day-to-day interaction with them. Just, I believe in transparency, so before I make any big financial move or idea casting or whatever it is, I'm usually communicating on a daily basis with the board president about what we're up to, what we're doing, what kind of culture we're trying to generate, products, those kinds of things, just so at least someone on the board is always in the loop. That way, if something comes down to a board meeting and the board goes, well, why did you make that decision? It's like, oh, well, kind of covers me a little bit. I was like, well, This was discussed with the head of our organization. Sure. So, but it's not just to protect me. It's, again, I believe in transparency and just making sure there's open lines of communication there, so that way no one's caught off guard. Which at the end of the day does protect me a little bit. But really, it's a relationship of communication and mutual trust, really. The board members, some of them are more active because, they have all of their own careers in the board. It's an unpaid board position, right? So all of these people that are sitting on our board are there because they want to be there. And they have their own careers and families. And so some of them are more active in the participation on the day-to-day side of TOVA, specifically like coming into the shop, seeing the daily processes and procedures that we've established, those kinds of things. But some are more active, right? So our current board president, we just went through a leadership transition at the beginning of this year, he's there sometimes twice a day, right? So he's very active in the culture and what we're doing there and the projects that we've got going on. And really, at the end of the day, it's my job to communicate and navigate the relationship with the board, make sure that everything is good, that the finances are where they need to be, and that, again, that we are accomplishing what we set out to accomplish when TOVA opened, which is our mission to elevate and eliminate poverty in the Lubbock community.
So when you're talking about like culture, and it's a fascinating conversation that Travis and I have on this podcast all the time. I think culture is very indicative of branding, right? I think that what we're trying to do with this podcast is really change people's understanding of what a brand actually is. And I think most people think branding, they're thinking their logo, right? Or, the outside of their business or their office. And it's so much more than that. It's really your culture and every single interaction that someone has. If I drive up with your drive-through and an employee's gruff with me, right? Like that's part of your culture, right? That's your brand. That's people's interaction with it. So how culture is fascinating. And especially as someone that's in an executive director position like you are, you have, I think, two different cultures that you're really seeking to change and impact. One being people's perception. They walk into their coffee shop. How do they feel from a consumer level? What is the culture and the environment that I'm interacting with? And then the other one being just your employees and your work staff, right? Just the behind the scenes, the people that are there, the ones that are making those touch points and interactions, like creating a culture for them as well. So I guess part of me is just curious and interested. When you took on this role, when you stepped into this spot, what have been challenges or hurdles and what have been some victories, and kind of how have you changed the culture of both of those spheres of consumer and employee?
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's a big question. And I mean, that's actually something that I learned from y'all when you're talking about brand and the interaction. Like every interaction with your organization is your brand. And that's something that I actually have taken with me for the last couple years in my job as a learning milestone, just because I fully agree with that statement. Because, something, I use, for example, I tell my employees every time during training, like every time you pick up the phone, right? And whether they're someone who comes in regularly or they're a new person calling just to see the shop hours, like every time you answer the phone and how you answer it is an interaction with who we are, right? Our brand. And I think every action matters, right? And
Absolutely.
so really when it comes to our culture, I think that's probably the two words I would say really that we've tried to cultivate in all the things that we do. Of course, and most businesses are going to say this, right? But
Right.
really integrity and authenticity, right? But TOVA is not a corporate feel, right? If anything, we're not a Starbucks, right? There's nothing necessarily wrong with Starbucks in a large scheme of things, but that's
Sure.
not the kind of culture we're trying to generate. The kind of culture that we're trying to generate is, especially when you come into the shop, is we are trying to facilitate connection that will eventually evolve into community, right? So what does that look like? And especially what's really cool about a shop dynamic is coffee is the thing that brings people together.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really matter what the person is doing. They could be coming, working from business stuff. I mean, you guys come into the shop every now and then and you're working on your marketing things. We got people who are in college or grad school. You got relationships are forming. We've had engagements pop up at our shop. It's we've had people get married and the first thing they do is leave and they come to the shop for a cup of coffee, dressed in the suit and tie and the dress and everything. And you're
Seems
like,
legit.
it is
Right.
it is really cool. But that's what I mean when I say culture is we're really trying to generate a place where genuine connectivity can take place regardless of who you are, what your journey's been, what your story is. And I think really that very much aligns with the mission and the vision of what TOVA Coffeehouse is as one of our core tenets, right? I mean, we are a faith-based nonprofit, right? And so recognizing one of our core tenets in developing that culture is being able to recognize the dignity that exists within each person, right? And so being able to emulate that idea and model that, right, with our services, right, with the way that my baristas treat each of our guests, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also, but like you said, on a team dynamic perspective, everything that we do, specifically me and my core management, how we treat our employees matters, right? Because we can't just be saying these things like this is how you need to treat our guests, but we're going to do it differently when it comes to how we're leading the shop. So again, how do we maintain integrity and authenticity wrapped up in virtue and all
Right.
the other things ethically? Like, how do we do these things and emulate a posture from the top down, not only with the internal system of our organization, but also hopefully how does that get manifested into the day-to-day life and our guest interaction? So,
Yeah.
Absolutely. What advice would you have for like other leaders that are trying to implement a company culture?
Yeah.
What does that process look like? How do you adopt that culture for yourself? How do you believe in it so much on the inside? And then how are you able to like replicate that in the people that work for you?
Sure. Well, I'll say, I guess it depends on the person, right, at the top of the system and kind of what that person believes in and like maybe what their moral compass is and center,
Sure.
right? I think that drives, again, as a faith-based Christian nonprofit organization, there are obviously core theological tenets that drive the motivation behind everything that we do. Now, we don't espouse those things regularly, right? We're not trying to convert people. That's not our job, right? But we are trying to emulate and posture a model of witness that speaks to something greater than ourselves. And so we have a core or a foundation, so to speak, that I would say everything is built on that kind of guides our thinking and our actions and our words in the best way possible. Do we fail at those things? Absolutely. But I think we have a foundation that kind of sets us up for the decisions that we try to make on a day-to-day basis, right? But if I had any advice, and I'm probably one of the worst people to do this, which is why I'm trying to give it as advice, is I think you have to be able to trust and empower the people on your team to do what they're doing,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I
It's
think
huge. Yep.
I mean, I can't do it by myself. If I tried to do this position and take care of everything and do everything, this business would fail immediately, right? I have been blessed with a great staff and with great managers that have kind of come up over time, but I trust them. I trust them to not only do their jobs and the things that I've outlined for wanting them to do, but I want there to be a creative freedom for them to take on the role and to make it more. I want them to be passionate about their role, and I want them to do what they love to do.
Right.
And I know and trust that they're going to do it well. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be mistakes. There aren't going to be learning curves or failures and things for us to correct and navigate over time. But I believe it is my job to empower the positions under me to be a successful organization. And I think that's what I do more on a daily basis for my team specifically. And so again, if I had advice, if you're a leader in an organization, figuring out ways that you can empower your staff or anybody that's working under you to not only perform their job, but to thrive in their job, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is huge. I talk to business owners all the time, and especially their staff, and there's a very big push against, when you're talking about workplace shifts that are happening right now, and even millennials and below that are going into the workplace, there's a lot of business owners that don't understand millennial dynamics and just think that it's a poor workforce that comes from it, and they don't get it. And I think that a lot of what I hear from them and kind of their major complaint is that these people don't have ownership, like personal ownership of themselves or their job. And that's kind of what they hinge on and look at, is these people just come in and they don't have personal ownership. They don't have discipline. They don't have these things. And it's because like legitimately what you said, like they can't have ownership of something if you aren't empowering them and giving them the freedom to make mistakes, right?
Yep.
They can't own something if they don't own it. They're always going to carry an employee mindset coming in if they know that you're the owner, you're the authority figure, you're the one that this is all riding on, and you've given them nothing to personally own and have and to make mistakes with. And like you have to create a culture of discipleship inside, even if you're not a Christian business, even if you're not a Christian, just taking on this understanding that culture doesn't, like it can flow from the top down, but it rarely can a single person impact a large company's culture just by themselves.
Sure.
What that requires is the guy who is the culture carrier has that, like you do. You have a board of directors that are helping to make sure that you're staying on point with your culture, and that ownership that you have, you become a culture carrier of that. But then it's your job to make sure that you are like going down to your management team and you are being that person of integrity that you're wanting to espouse. You're being that person that's showing up and having personal ownership, but you're also giving them the tools they need to own their specific section and take full creative ability. And even if it's not the way that you would do it, right? That's the biggest fear that I think business owners encounter is it's like, whoa, they're doing it different. It's like, well, that's because they're not you. And as long as what I've heard is like, as long as it's about 80% of the way that you would do it, like give them that 20% freedom to where they put their personal spin on it and really just run with it, right? Because you don't have time to micromanage. And I think so many people kill personal ownership in their companies and their employees because they just micromanage the hang out of their employee base and their managers, and they don't understand why people aren't owning it because you've like not incentivized why I would want to own something when it's not mine at all. You're the one decision maker. I don't get a chance to run with it. My dad would say, like, give me enough rope to hang myself was kind of the position that he appreciated, where he's like, give me enough freedom for me to run around and do what I need to do, but also to where I can own it completely. If I make a mistake and I botch this, like this is the rope that it's me, it's on me. But that was, I think, that type of culture and giving your employees that ability, empowering them to have the ability to make mistakes and to run within their own department and their sphere is going to create that culture.
I've just seen so many business owners when they're finally at the point where they can start hiring and bringing a staff on, they really lack the ability to trust, and so they put everything on their back, and they get completely burnt out, even though they're financially investing in the help they actually need to broaden their bandwidth and to offer a better service and to not be so run down. And it's this lack of trust, and so many people really struggle to get to that place. Surely that didn't come naturally for you.
You know,
or did it?
Luckily Going into a little bit of the story of how I got into this position, I think I saw at least the person that was the general manager before me. I think it's safe to say that he struggled with that trusting, with the things that we're talking about, right? It's one of those things that, you have those people in organizations that they do try to micromanage all the things, and they do put all the things on their back. And so clearly, maybe in some systems it can work, and maybe in some systems that's fine. But of course, the stress that, builds up over time, the pressure that has, and again, the lack of ownership that Caleb has been talking about, when you have people that are wanting and willing to help and contribute, and to be able to have the creative freedom to at least vocalize their ideas without fear of those ideas being shot down immediately, but the ability to be heard and those kinds of things, those are important realities also to set. And I think with TOVA, right, we transitioned out of a period of leadership where maybe those things weren't happening as well. And so we learned from that. Right. So, and again, it's nothing bad. People are different and they have different styles of leadership, but we saw that in our context, that wasn't working. And so it was either keep doing the same thing, knowing that it's not going to work and it's ultimately going to fail for everyone, or we adapt and we try something new. And so I think some of that was natural with me, but a lot of it was just learning with what came before, right?
Right. You've had such an interesting run. Just for context, when I was at my previous agency, I was actually working a ton at TOVA, and that's how I got to know you.
Right.
You were a grunt barista behind the bar learning things. You were not a shift lead. You were not a leader at TOVA at the time. And you go from being at the bottom of the totem pole to the head of operations for a nonprofit organization and running a business for the first time in your life. TOVA had this super turbulent year. You pull that out of a nosedive. And then once you get to somewhere stable, you run directly into the COVID-19 pandemic craziness.
Right.
Why did they select you? Like what was that conversation like when you go to work and you're expecting to go make a bunch of Cubans and they approach you and you're like, hey, we're going to leapfrog you above all of your peers and you're going to be the new GM executive director role. Like, what was that like?
Sure. Well, initially, of course, it was a huge surprise, right? I didn't expect anything like that. I mean, at the time that I was working as a barista, that's really all I wanted to do, right? I mean, I was in the middle of grad school and I was just working to have a job and pay the bills, like most of us, right? It wasn't...
Not on the radar.
I had no expectations of doing what I'm doing now, nor did I really have any aspirations, for doing what I'm doing now. So when the board of directors asked me to take this position, of course, like I said, ultimately it was a surprise, but I think the conversations that came after that and me asking why me, the question that you're asking, I don't have really a lot of details, but I think essentially what it boiled down to is I worked there, I think more than the managers did at the time. So I was at the shop a lot, and I was at the shop with the GM that was there at the time a lot and built a relationship. And I think more than anything, they probably just saw my work ethic as a barista.
Sure.
I mean, I can't speak for myself and I don't want to, but I mean, like you said, you were there for those early days. And I can't, again, without sounding like too arrogant, I think I just worked hard.
Sure.
And I think they saw that. And I think they saw my ability to connect with people and to learn the system. And I think ultimately they just saw something in me. And of course, with a lot of prayer and discernment on their end, I was the person that they came to with that option.
I remember that day like it was yesterday, dude.
I do too. I do too.
I was sitting at the bar next to you, to your left, and I look over and you are frantically typing so many notes. And I'm like talking to you a little bit like I usually do. And it's just like, it's just all going over your head.
Yep.
And then Aaron came over and the president at the time came over and talked to me a little bit about what was going on. And he's like, yeah, we're going to bring in a new GM. And I looked over in your direction going, it's John. I'm like, I like it.
Right.
It's going to be good. Were you afraid? Were you intimidated? What was that like? What were the initial hurdles you had to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, wow, so many, right? I think ultimately the experience can be described as a baptism by fire, right? I mean, there was just
I love those.
right.
That's how it is for everyone.
You know, I had no idea what I was doing. My background,
Right.
both in my undergrad and grad school, is I'm a nerd, right? So I did theology stuff. I barely knew how to open up Microsoft Excel, let alone plug in a formula to it, right? And I still don't know really that much of what I'm doing, right? It's just we're learning as we go, as all of us do. And so when that initial experience happened, of course I was scared, right? Because there was a lot of pressure, right?
Sure.
There was a lot of pressure. I mean, we weren't doing well. And it was one of those things where I was thrown in and those expectations were put on me. Then the realities, the financial realities of we're not doing well, and we essentially have a time frame of anywhere between 4 months or so to turn this around, or this isn't going to work out, right?
Right.
And it was such a shame to hear that because of TOVA's unique mission and vision of what we're trying to
Right.
do. And there are a lot of people on staff, including not just myself, but a lot of other people on our staff now that are now my managers, right, that really believed in what we were doing as an organization. And so,
Right.
again, lots of hurdles, of course. Team dynamics, right, is just, I mean, I remember having the first team meeting like maybe 2 weeks after it had become official that I was like the interim GM. And the first conversation I had to have with all my employees was, you're all getting paid too much hourly, and we're going to have to cut wages.
Oh, no.
I mean, right? It's like, who wants to start off that way, right?
Baptism by fire.
The way to
indeed.
build a culture, yeah.
But the reality is we were, with the leadership that we had previously, we were just paying too much per hour, you know, for Lubbock, West Texas, those kinds of, like, there's a lot of factors that go into that, right? But for a Lubbock, West Texas nonprofit, small local coffee shop, we were paying too much hourly. And that was, I mean, as you guys know, payroll expenses are the most, it's the most of what you pay for any organization, right? And you have to be able to take care of your employees, of course. But when we were in the position that we were in, the financial position that we were in, recognizing that that percentage was way too high, and if we didn't do something about that, then we were going to sink, right? So how do we begin to mitigate our losses? And unfortunately, that was one of the first, but definitely not the only place where we had to start essentially penny pinching, right? I mean, that's what we were looking at, is where are we losing money? How do we stop losing money?
Right.
And I mean, that's really as simple as it gets. But of course, being able to navigate that and tell your team 2 weeks after stepping in that we're going to be essentially cutting your wages, that's not an easy conversation.
No.
Not at all. Not at all, but a necessary one.
Right. You know, and the idea is if we don't do this now, you might not have jobs in 4 months. And that's just the reality. So it's like being able to respect and trust your team that we're not doing this because we're
miserly.
Yeah, we're not
Right.
we're not doing this because we want to do this. We're doing this because for job security for all of us here, if we
We
want
have
to
to
have
save the
a job in
shop.
4 months, we have to save the shop, and this is one of those necessary actions that we have to take. And again, it goes into trusting people. I think I was able to step into that really well. We had a lot of people when I transitioned, right? I had a lot of people step up to the plate with me that I was easily able to delegate and trust them to do what they were gifted at, and ideally empower them to do their job well. And so I think, I mean, that's not really a hurdle, right? That was just something that just kind of happened. But
Sure.
I mean, there's team dynamics, of course, is just, that's something that we wrestle with every single day and trying
Sure.
to figure out, because it's people, right?
It's
it doesn't
never-ending
matter,
struggle.
right? It doesn't matter what your organization is. It's like, it's the people that work with you that generate the culture, that make the products and all the different things, right? And it's difficult to navigate those kind of employee dynamic tensions. And especially like you said, I mean, I went from a barista to I leapfrogged the other managers that were there. So going from a position of inferiority in that sense, right, to a position of being their superior, of course that's going to
that's a weird
it
weird
is.
feeling
It was
for them
weird for
probably,
them.
too.
Yeah, it was weird for the managers, and it was weird for me because all of these people that I was working with were just my friends, right?
Yeah,
And
sure.
they were just my coworkers, and
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I was close to all of them, most of them on a very friend-based level.
And then overnight, the relationship completely
Right.
shifts.
And so how do you differentiate that role? How do you make, I think that's the struggle for anybody. It's like
Right.
you want to be the cool employer, but you also have to be rigid at some points, and you have to take charge, and you have to be the one that's, you're in charge now, and you have a lot of responsibility of your shoulders, but you don't want to be the person, you don't want to be seen as the boss, but you want to be respected. It's a weird tension.
Like, so what I'm understanding is like the path of stability, it was a lot of cut, like in terms of like the spend on employees and salaries and all that. But like, did TOVA take any other steps to get to stability that wasn't necessarily like cutting down on costs? Did you guys shift your offerings around that time? Did you audit
Sure.
where money was being spent from the customer's end?
Absolutely. I mean, we took about 3 to 4 weeks, and we analyzed every single process that we currently had in our organization to the nth degree,
Sure.
right? Looking at where can we maximize things? Where are we spending money that we shouldn't? So again, like where do we cut, and where do we have the potential to gain more? So an example, something as simple as we make our own pastries in-house, right? And we had a microwave, but our microwave was in the kitchen, which is in a separate, if
Right.
anyone's listening and they know about TOVA, it was back in the kitchen away from the bar. So anytime someone ordered a pastry, we were taking a
It was not
pastry
an
from
efficient
up
process.
front and going all the way to the kitchen to heat it up, having a barista wait for 30, 45 seconds, a minute, however, taking it out, then bringing it all the way back out to the front. That didn't make sense. So, of course, we made an adjustment. We cut a hole in one of our counters. We put a microwave right under the pastry case, and it's like, oh, someone orders it. It's heated up. Usually, by the time they leave the point of sale system, their pastry's ready for them to have in hand, right? So it's things like that. It's not just a financial move. It's how can we quicken our efficiency, right? Or that might have been redundant to say, but how can we make things more efficient, and how can we serve well
Sure.
to bring in customers that want to come in? How can we make things faster, especially through our drive-through? That's another thing. Like, how do we maximize this experience as much as possible so that people are willing to come by and utilize our at least our drive-through service, right? Especially in the mornings when people are on their way to work or doing whatever. How do we maximize the systems that we have to make and generate more money? And what are the systems that we have in place that are losing us money, right? So coffee expenses, right? It's not just employees. That was one thing that we did. But of course, you're looking at coffee. You're looking at cost per pound of bag, or 5-pound bags of bag, or 5-pound bags of coffee. How much does that cost? And any kind of merchandise that we're spending, any kind of operational expense that we're spending, what does that look like? Where can we save money? What is costing us, and where can we save? And that's really what it turned into.
Yeah.
right?
Did y'all adjust prices at the time of any of your drinks?
Absolutely.
So you guys increased?
Yeah, our prices for the demographic of the area that we're in, our prices were much too low for sure. And so, yeah, increased prices was definitely a thing, which helped, of course. I'm trying to think of other things, but I mean, literally everything that we did, every system, every product, everything that we had was put into question. Right?
Sure. I think I just want to return really quickly. You mentioned just the dynamic between you changing from just being a friend to being a boss. And I think that lots of people, especially business owners, when you begin to get employees in, and we've encountered it ourselves here at Monsoon, it's like, how do you create the separation between an authority figure that needs to be taken seriously, and that there are consequences for behavior, even if I understand it from a friend dynamic?
Right.
and I think that something that has helped me with that relationship is that you can, as an authority figure, hold a high standard for your employees if you are walking that out yourself. And I think you can hold a high standard with them if they see two things. One is expertise, and the other one being like passion, right? So like having that dynamic and that shift relationship and creating the respect that's there. A lot of people just think respect is due to them because they hold a title, and it doesn't really work or flow that way.
Right.
And I think that when you are wanting to, I think you can be a great boss and have good rapport,
Absolutely.
right? And I say rapport intentionally because how I treat a friend in struggles and in times of stress and in situations is just different than how an employee needs to be
Right.
talked to, right? And I think that from a leadership perspective, you could have come in and just been like they're my friends. I don't want them getting paid less. And how you felt in that moment in the dynamic of what needed to happen for the business's health compared to what would put a potential strain on the friendships that you had made. Like I see that dynamic and that issue. And I think that you like being able to choose well, but alongside of that saying like, I have a vision, I'm passionate about this, I'm with you guys in the middle of this, and I'm not asking you guys to do something that I'm not doing myself, right?
Sure.
I think that's one of the main ways that you lose respect with people is if you put pressure and weight and expectation on them and you're not walking the same walk.
Absolutely.
And so I think creating that separation and again, having good rapport with your employees, having good rapport with your staff, if you love what you're doing and you're showing up every single day and you're passionate and you're casting a vision about what's happening and they're getting caught up into that environment, they're going to respect you.
Right.
That someone is at the helm who has vision, has expertise, and has a passion about where they're going. Respect is just going to flow off of that.
Sure.
And I think that you can hold a high standard to them and say, listen, you really screwed up here. You have to own this. But you also, as the leader, need to be owning when you've screwed up as well.
Right.
Like publicly with your staff saying, listen, that was on me. I made this decision and I led y'all wrong and you guys followed me and we ended up in a bad spot. This is on me and
Yep.
you own it, right? I think that you need to be walking it out ahead of them. And I think that you can create that dynamic that you're talking about. I just wanted to revisit that because I think it's
sure.
important. And I've heard several times from so many different business owners about, I don't know, I like this person, but I don't necessarily want the friendship to bleed over into my decision making to where I'm not objective anymore.
Oh yeah, and there's a fine line between a leader and a boss.
Sure.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can be a leader and not all bosses are leaders, but all leaders are probably bosses. Well, maybe not. But
That makes sense to me, right?
yeah, I guess.
We'll let you figure that out.
But yeah, I guess all I'm just trying to say is like real leadership, you're gonna take ownership for everything you do, ownership for what your team is involved in. You're going to get in the trenches with your people. You're going to live out the culture yourself. You're going to treat them how you want them to treat your customers. Mm-hmm. All of that. That's how you lead. A lot of bosses, they like to impose the culture on them and not live it out themselves, sit in the back of the store and,
Right.
It's authenticity, right? And I think that like there are business structures where just as a boss, I cannot give every single person access to me, right? Sure. That's just reality, right? And I get that separation that's there, but it's very difficult for someone who's down in the trenches to hear a directive or a change and feel like it's coming from somebody who has no clue, has never been there before, right? It's probably really easy for you to step in and be like, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And you go up and you pull an incredible ristretto shot like in front of them. And they're like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing, knows what he's talking about. He gets it, right? Like I think that you were able to understand the processes and what needed to be changed and lead from that perspective. Even the microwave situation. Right. You were the guy that took the pastry and walked to the kitchen and came back and you're like, this sucks and it makes no sense. Right. Like you, because of a level of expertise, were able to showcase that you knew what was happening and knew what was going on, right? And I think that like authenticity is what people are looking for inside of their leader. They want someone that is transparent, that understands where they're coming from, and is creating that culture by walking it out themselves. And if you're not showcasing that you're walking it out, like even from a distance, like it's very difficult for people to want to follow you or even trust you or understand where you're coming from. And it creates this questioning that ends up happening. And I've seen it happen in so many businesses where they learn, like you can have a great training session. You onboard people, you bring them in, you have the GM and the manager making these touch points and saying, this is who we are, this is how we treat people, this is how we do things. And you're giving them good processes. And then the very next day when you disconnect, you're like, I trained that person well. They sit down right next to the other barista who's been there for like a year and a half and is kind of just over the whole culture. And they're like, I know that they said that, newbie, but here's the real way that it is. And they will learn more from the person that's in the trenches with them about culture than they learn from your single touch point, if that's the only time that you're touching your employees. And I think that's really when toxicity begins happening and you have a culture that's actually being completely subverted right off the get-go, right after initial training happens. And it can be a very big problem that can happen if you have a leadership team that is disconnected from, and you're not having a culture that's actually carried out when someone's in the drive-through window. If they're fine cutting corners and that's what they're being taught, then you're going to have an entire process that's worth cutting corners and not upheld.
Absolutely.
Sure. I know one thing that's like helped me cultivate like leadership qualities in myself is really learning how to communicate and navigate through adversity and really crazy, uncertain times, right? And kind of like I mentioned earlier, you were super new to your role. You put these new processes in place, you make things more efficient, you raise prices, you cut back on employee, wages, and do whatever you have to do to stabilize this nonprofit organization. And you finally get to this good place, and then COVID-19 comes around in March, and there's all this uncertainty about like, will restaurants or coffee shops,
what does food service look like?
Like, are they all going to shut down, or are these businesses going to be completely closed down indefinitely? Like, we have to wear masks. We have new protocols. We don't really know what's going on. We don't really understand this virus. We don't know anything, right? What was that like for you coming out of stabilizing, going directly into COVID-19? Like, how'd you feel about that? And then what steps did you take to navigate it? What did you try? What failed? What worked?
Right.
Like, I know it's kind of a lot, but like, how did you navigate the pandemic last year?
Right. I mean, that's a big question, of course, but it was funny because as we were approaching March, literally almost a year ago, we were sitting in our board meeting on February and we were talking together, and we're very excited because our projections had us believing that March was going to be the best month that we've ever had.
Your 2020
on
vision.
record. Really. I mean, we had great months leading up to it.
Yeah.
The year of work that we spent putting into kind of rebuilding a lot of the things that you were talking about. And we were very excited for March to come because we were just anticipating the numbers to,
Gonna crush it.
Right. And of course, this unknown, mysterious plague from across the world just starts spreading everywhere. And no one really knows what's going on. No one really understands it.
Sure.
Really, the whole experience, especially the beginning of it, was just such an enigma for everyone. And of course, being in West Texas, I think we typically, I don't want to speak for everyone, but we handled things a little bit differently than the rest of the world, right? For one reason or another, right? I would say you can call it stubbornness or you can call it whatever you want, right?
Right.
But I think statistically speaking, we were probably one of the least affected areas in the world as far as like economy, right? And I don't have actual numbers, so don't cite me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty accurate. But regardless of how it affected, the rest of the world, it was still a challenge for us because, of course, you want to do everything. Well, one, you want to stay within the legal parameters, right? You don't want to do anything that's going to get you shut down, right? Especially with like health code, knowing what to do, knowing what not to do, creating regulations for health things. And so, of course, like most businesses, we were considered an essential business because we did food and beverages and those kinds of things. So we were actually allowed to stay open, but we closed our lobby for an entire 3 months. So no one besides my staff, my management team came in from March 14th, whatever day it was. And then we didn't open up our shop back to consumers until June June 14th, or, almost exactly 3 months from the time in which we closed, we opened again.
Right. So
right.
There's 3 months of drive-through.
3 months of only drive-through, right? And baristas are required to wear masks. We've got all the hand sanitizer things that we're working on. We're trying to not only create health regulations for our guests so they can feel comfortable coming and ordering products and knowing that it's going to be a safe product,
Right.
but also for our employees to make sure that we're not spreading anything to each other, right? And making sure that we have a healthy shop.
Sure.
And so really, a lot of it was sitting down with my director of operations and planning out these processes. What processes need to be initiated? What are the legal things that are being required of us by the state of Texas or the national government? What are the new regulations being implemented? Just with everyone saying everything, what is the real truth behind the virus, right? And when I say real truth, I mean, we're just trying to figure it out, what's really going on with this virus.
No one seems to know.
Right. If you ask, depending on who you ask, especially if it's via social media, everyone has their opinions about
still
it,
don't
right?
know.
And right.
We're 100%. We're still figuring it out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're literally almost a year out, and it's just such a crazy thing that has happened this past year. And so we're trying to figure out the most that we can about it, understand it, but understanding that from, again, a business perspective, if we go too long in this direction, we won't be able to make it with what we have now. So the question is, I think you asked, is how did we survive, or how did we make it through it? Well, we had to adapt. So the largest things that we did in that time was, of course, we had to be creative, and we had to figure out alternative ways for people to order our products that were safe. So at the time, we had no services from getting our products outside of our shop to the Lubbock community unless they came to our physical shop location, whether that was through drive-through or just walking into the shop. So we jumped on almost every delivery platform that you can think of. Not every, right? There's quite a bit out there, but we jumped onto DoorDash, we jumped onto Uber Eats, we jumped onto Favor, which I believe is more of a Texas delivery service. We hopped on with an online service that helped us create an online ordering platform that we were able to put onto our website. It also allowed us to do curbside delivery, so we created signs where people could come and drive up, scan with their phones, order, those kinds of things. So we created alternative avenues by which people could order their products and still feel safe knowing that they couldn't come into the shop, right? So that was the first big thing. The second big thing is we were trying to be creative as far as what we were offering at the shop. So we created bundles, whether that's pastry bundles, whether that's breakfast bundles, whether that's drink bundles, doing whatever we can to sell more products per sale, raising the average ticket, because for the first few weeks of COVID, it was just me and my managers working. We essentially had to give a temporary hiatus to most of our employees because we knew we wouldn't be able to. I think at the time we had just a little bit under 14 total staff, and of course they couldn't pick up the hours. We couldn't pay them and ourselves. So in order to keep the organization moving for about 3 weeks, it's okay, again, without laying anybody off, luckily, permanently, we had to say, we got to cut your hours. And some of them had to be cut completely as far as hours for a good period of 3 weeks. And then, of course, we took action with the PPP loan, and we were blessed by the money that we were gotten there. So, of course, we took that PPP loan and we used it for what it was meant to do, which is to pay employee wages. We got our employees back, having their hours, being able to sustain them. And the money that we were generating on the daily, on the day-to-day sales, we actually started using that money because we were closed for 3 months to reimagine and completely, almost what we've called it is give TOVA a facelift. Yeah. the interior of our shop, so that way when we were looking forward to opening our doors again to the public, it would be a completely new experience, right?
Yeah, and I want to highlight that too, because I'm glad that you brought it up, because it's something that I noticed on the outside as I'm watching businesses, food service, so many people struggling. How do I get my product out when people can't come in, and navigating that, finding good ways and bad ways to get delivery to happen. I think that what was fascinating is that I saw very few companies in the middle of a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty actually use that shutdown to their advantage. And you had a lobby that was shut down that you couldn't have people inside. So instead, you guys did a ton of interior remodeling and improvement and built out something that was better. And you leveraged that hiatus and that pandemic to when you did open the lobby, it's much more like open and refreshing, and the color palette, like you guys did a lot of changes to actually improve the space in the building. And I think that that's something worth noting towards success, that it's not just getting your food out, you also worked on yourself in the middle of that time and took full advantage of the gap that happened. So kudos to TOVA for that.
Yeah, like not just capitalizing on like these like great opportunities that come at us, but also capitalizing on the adversity that we're handed too. And you guys did that extremely well.
And if I can, I just want to, 2 more things I want to say to that.
Sure.
Before we leave the question, because I just can't emphasize enough the other reasons that we were successful too. And I said this earlier, Lubbock has a great community. People responded to us very well during the time of the pandemic. So we had a lot of great people that through thick or thin, they were coming through our drive-through, even if that was the only way they could get their coffee or if they had to wait in line forever, you know.
Sure.
I don't know if you guys remember this, but we did a rally for coffee event where we cooperated with other local specialty coffee shops where we all kind of had an entire weekend dedicated to generating business for us. And the community showed up with a lot of pride and with a lot of support. And so we couldn't have done it without the support of the community, of course. The second thing is, again, and I can't stress this enough, we have a great team. The creativity, the ability for us to adapt with all the things that I just said and do the interior renovations and the different apparatuses for delivery of our products. A lot of that, as much as I would like to take credit for all of those things, right? That's purely not the case. We have a great team that worked together and were able to come up with those things and, you know, allow those things to bring in the money that we needed to do all the things that we did. So trying to give credit where credit's due, of course.
I distinctly remember sitting in my wife's car with her. We were like in this huge line just to get some TOVA coffee. It was crazy. I was really feeling it. I'm like, people came out and we're buying coffee and going local and doing the whole thing. So it was cool to see like the community rally to help you guys out.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. So we're not completely on the other side of the pandemic, but we're definitely in a kind of a more of an easier place, like places are starting to kind of open up a little bit. And I think we've, as a species, we've definitely adapted a little bit to life. And I think we're a little less afraid now. What are you learning currently to kind of push the shop forward?
So, I mean, COVID was interesting because it forced us to adapt, right? It forced us in a position where we had to do a lot of new things if we're going to survive. And I think the position that it put us in, I think honestly was a great mind shift for us, because I believe that for us to continue to be a successful business and all the things that we're doing is we're always trying to, of course, get better at the things, maximize the systems that we have, but look into alternative ways of bringing in money to the shop in order for us to accomplish our mission, our vision. So a couple of the things that we're learning right now and undergoing the processes are, how do we fully maximize our drive-through experience? Right now, we've got it pretty much to the point where it's as fast as it's going to get with the amount of employees that we have and the fact that you have to order right when you get to the window, right? We don't have the technology incorporated to where you can order 3 car lengths back and, you know, have the baristas aware of their order. Right. And so we're figuring out, without trying to go too much into the corporate Starbucks feel, you know, and this is the issue, right? How do we do it? What technology do we incorporate without shifting completely in that direction, but also allowing us the opportunity to maximize the system to generate more revenue? So that's one of the current projects we're on right now, is drive-through systems, right? How do we do it? What's the technology that we utilize for it? how much is the project going to cost for us to actually implement those kinds of things. We're actually about to launch a really cool new project where I'm speaking a little ahead of time, but that's okay. But we're redoing our cold brew bottle system. And hopefully within the next couple of months, we're going to be actually manufacturing and distributing our cold brew products to United locations, United supermarket locations here in
Super
Lubbock,
cool.
Texas, right?
Yeah.
So cool.
So I think we have a minimum of 7 locations that we'll be placing our bottles into.
Sure.
So we're completely, and I would say very hurriedly, we're in the process of organizing those systems, getting things ready for the manufacturing and the distribution processes with me and my managers. I mean, this is fresh. So that's been really interesting to learn how to do that, with getting the nutrition label ready to go, those kinds of things, and getting everything modeled and branded well, as far as the label, which you guys helped us out with in creating, right? So it's like there's a lot of different steps that we have to take. This has been a project that we've been working on for almost a year, and I think it's going to be really cool to be able to launch that in the next month or two. And I think not only for revenue side, I think it's going to provide immeasurable marketing opportunities for us in the Lubbock community for people to see our products on shelves, right? Things
Definitely.
that I can't calculate, right? And so I think it's a pro both ways in that, right? And so those are just 2 of the recent projects that we're looking into right now. There's always so much more. I mean, we got a survey launching out this next week that you guys also helped develop for us, right? We're considering, right, depending on how much of the feedback we get, considering trying to create a nightlife at TOVA. So a really popular thing that's happening in coffee shops just around the nation really is being able to create a space where specialty coffee is served, but also where you're serving specialty craft drinks, right? So alcoholic beverages of some sort. So that's not a for sure thing, but that's something that we're looking into because, again, alternative revenue streams. What are the things that we can do to bring in money that is going to accomplish our mission and vision, right?
Sure.
And so, again, there's probably at least 3 other things I could mention, but we'll stop there, right?
For sure. For sure. Man, we're about out of time, so we're going to land the plane here in a bit, but I want to give you an opportunity just to plug whatever you want. What do you have going on right now?
Wow. Well, again, kind of going back to the last question, we always are working on so many different things. Of course, TOVA has always new seasonal things coming up. We're about to get out of the winter season. We're getting into our spring seasonal drinks and things that we've got launching, pastries, those kinds of things. We'll have a new Cause Drink latte for our Cause Drink partnership that we do with, and that's more of the missional side of things, but we've got a new lineup of things coming out around March 15th. That'll be really exciting for us to launch. We've got an incredible new mural that's coming up into the shop. This is more of an interior, aesthetic thing, but we've got an employee who's a wonderful, wonderful artist. That is, if you haven't been to the shop yet or you haven't been recently, she's depicting the entire seed to cup process of the
Super
coffee
cool.
bean, and it's done in a way that I think really articulates the culture of TOVA, right? It's not scientific, right? It's not like a couple boards that describes this process, but it's a way of creatively representing the entire coffee process from seed to cup, and it's huge. It's on the wall. It's above our merch stuff. It's just something that absorbs the entire space, and it's unique. And I think that's something really cool that we've got coming. And that's just something to come and see, really. But we're actually in the next 2 weeks about to switch to a new primary roaster. So we're going to be working. Unfortunately, Merit has been a great partner with us for over 2 years, but we're switching in a different direction to a place called Greater Goods out in the Austin area. They have a very similar mission and heart behind what they do with their coffee, similar to us, and they've got a lot of training and different things that me and my management will be able to utilize and learn from them in order to develop our careers as TOVA continues to grow. And fingers crossed, by the end of this year, it's possible that TOVA will have 2 micro locations outside of our shop.
Ooh.
Right. So we're in the works with another nonprofit organization here in town that's wanting to get a mini TOVA location set up inside their building. I'll leave their name out of it for now because all these things are in the works.
Right.
And another location, so that would be on the east side of town, and then another micro location on the north side of town. So really cool things coming to TOVA. There's always new deals. I mean, that's the culture of our shop, right? We're always putting out new drinks, new pastries for that kind of experience, that genuine experience of coming in and, you know, experiencing what it means to be a loyal TOVA supporter. So
well, that's awesome. For those like that are in the Lubbock area that haven't interacted with TOVA, I just want to give a little plug myself. Like, go to TOVA and get yourself a Cuban. It's incredible. Like it's
game over.
It is game over. Like, for people that especially want a sweeter drink, their black coffee is incredible. The coffee beans that they use, the pour overs that they have inside of the store, it's an excellent cup of coffee, even from people that love black coffee all the way up to their pastries are delicious as well. The new Pop-Tarts that they're like rocking out with are so good. So if you haven't checked out TOVA, definitely go check it out. If you want a starter drink, get a Cuban. You'll understand right from there. Most people get hooked from the Cuban and stick around afterwards. So just wanted to give you a little plug
it's
myself.
An addictive path for sure. Most people, it's hard for them to fall away from. So absolutely.
Oh, man. Good deal. Well, thank you so much for listening and supporting us so far. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Stay tuned for weekly episodes dropped fresh every Friday. We're excited to keep making awesome content. Stay tuned for Disruption and Kindness episode 13 next Friday. Thanks.